high side and turn 6 early on this morning. He's fractured both arms, which means that he is absent. And this man, Diogo Moreira, goes it alone for Trans for the rest of the weekend, looking to achieve that to be crowned world champion. Those are the scenarios awaiting both title contenders this weekend. Diogo Moreira, who we just saw, Manu Gonzalez, who now plays the role of chaser, to overhaul a 24-point deficit, something that has never been done before at the final round of a Grand Prix World Championship. Lewis Letterby and Neil Morrison with you for our final Moto2 practice of the season. And Manu Gonzalez really does need Diogo Moreira to slip on a banana peel this weekend to open the door for him to win the World Championship. If there are some situations this weekend which could trip Diogo Moreira off, this session is potentially one of them.
Yeah, exactly. I wonder if we'll see one or two little mind games that we saw that certainly in the Friday afternoon practice session when we last visited Valencia in 2023 in MotoGP between Pecco Bagnaia and Jorge Martin. Martin was using some dark arts on that particular occasion to ensure that Pecco Bagnaia did not get into the top 10 towards the end play. I'm sure if Gonzalez really will see the point of it. We saw both riders on track earlier on in FP1. Nice and clean between them both. As we saw Jake Dixon there getting a quick reminder of what was going on from his crew chief. Yeah, Mark on the back of his head.
Got lots of hair. Power, if nothing else. Here's Ethan Guevara, who we're pleased to see is leathered up and ready to head back out on circuit this afternoon. He did, we believe, go for a precautionary trip to hospital earlier on today just to give himself the once over after going up and over twice earlier on today. Went down first one into crash this morning at turn 6. Certainly was not the last, as the session was interrupted due to a red flag as they tried to mop up any fluids or moisture that was still on the track surface. The session then resumed. Guevara quickly crashed again at turn 4, high side on the way out of the second gear right-hander. So he might not be showing it there, but Ethan Guevara surely in a little bit of pain as he gears up for this second session, which can't go anywhere from the first, Neil.
Yeah, exactly. As long as he stays on 2 wheels, it will be a marked improvement from this morning. Aaron Kane, you have to imagine, will be a challenger this weekend, just based on his previous record here. This is his home track. He'll be looking to leave what has largely been a very successful spell with Fantic and racing team on a positive note. This morning, all the times were exceptionally tight. Connect just over half a second off. Alex Scritch's quickest time. Not sure, Lewis, if the end of FP1 is really going to be a great guide as to how this weekend will play out. That might well prove to be wrong. But as ever, I feel the practice session here will give us a much better idea of who is exactly where. Celestino Vietti will be looking to improve on a wretched recent run. 8 points across the last 5 rounds for the Italian, who won his home Grand Prix and then went on to really not do very much during the flyaway rounds. 2 non-scores, a 19, an 11 and a 13 last time out in Portugal after he had been up there fighting for the podium position early on.
It's Philip Salac, who was another faller earlier on today. He went down at turn 6 as well. It was a fairly lengthy list of riders who could go down there either side of the stoppage. Salac ending the session, his 18th place. So close it was though in Moto2 earlier on today. Top 19 covered by just 3/4 of a second back to Marcos Ramirez. So it's going to be a tight old battle at the end of this session to see who advances through to qualifying 2. And as mentioned, this is perhaps one of these sessions of the weekend where Diogo Moreira is not going to win the World Championship. This is where he could potentially lose it. It is a weekend of navigating his way through some potential traps this weekend for the Brazilian. He gets himself through this session and into the top 14. He guarantees himself a place in the top 18 on the grid tomorrow, which is so much of the hard work done when you only need 14th place or higher to win the World Championship. Just to reiterate, as you saw on screen a moment ago, if Diogo Moreira finishes 14th, it's immaterial what Manu Gonzalez does this weekend. But Manu Gonzalez needs to win the Grand Prix or his hopes are gone. Gonzalez wins and Moreira is 14th or higher. Moreira is champion. Gonzalez wins and Moreira is 15th or lower. Gonzalez is champion.
Yeah, he only doesn't tell you that is a tall order for Manu Gonzalez to come away with the Moto2 Championship crown at the end of play here on Sunday. fact that Manu hasn't been on the podium for 7 races, I think, is testament to how long those odds are on him winning the championship. He's also got 12 races without a victory, so it is by no means a given that number 18 will be on the top step of the podium on Sunday, which I think is another reason why Gilgamera really can't come into this weekend with, obviously there's going to be pressure there, no question, but not really serious pressure, I don't feel. I might disagree though when we get to tomorrow, maybe even towards the end of this session. Gilmer did of course admit to some nerves in the early laps of the Portuguese Grand Prix when he wasn't quite riding with the usual fluency, found himself up in front and ahead of Colin Bayer, and once the Dutchman got in front of him he was able to settle down and get into a rhythm, and then what was ultimately the most impressive performance of his Grand Prix career. Indeed, one of the reasons why Moreira is very much in the driving seat here this weekend.
Another rider who impressed us in Portimao was David Alonso. As you saw there, he's currently 7th in the World Championship and likely to stay there. He's 4 points ahead of Celestino Vietti, who is in pretty poor form at the moment. Of course, Alonso comes here on the back of 3 consecutive podiums. They haven't come in time though for him to keep himself in the Rookie of the Year chase this weekend. That was wrapped up in Portimao by his teammate Danny Holgado. Number 27 in 7th place or higher to clinch the Rookie of the Year. 7th is exactly where he finished on the Algarve coast 5 days ago.
Yeah, been a really impressive late season run, David Alonso. In fact, a really impressive second half of the season. When you look at the points scored across the last 9 races, Alonso would actually be 3rd in that particular championship. But the rider that heads that little championship over the last 9 races is this name here, Diogo Moreira, just like he heads the overall championship. He had confirmation on your screen at 14th place. Wouldn't suffice for him to become Brazil's first ever motorcycle Grand Prix world champion. It is a massive deal, a massive honour. Moreira has hit peak form at exactly the right time and to lead the championship for the first time with just 2 races remaining in this year's championship. That shows that he really has timed his late run to perfection.
Of course, MotoGP in his future. He will be testing an LCR Honda for the very first time on Tuesday. Part of what is an intriguing day of testing as 2026 gets underway. On Tuesday morning we'll have full coverage here from the Ricardo Tomo circuit from for 10 AM as we now see some confirmation from the team of Ayumu Sasaki's absence from the rest of the weekend. We haven't received any official confirmation, but our understanding from some of our Dutch colleagues is that Ayumu has damaged his ankle in that crash earlier on today, so he unfortunately joins Adrian Huertas as a spectator for the rest of the weekend.
Yeah, real shame that for Ayumu, who was already planning to go under the knife during the off-season to alleviate some long conditions that have been fairly persistent over the last couple of months. But let's see how bad, how serious that ankle injury is. We saw him in the box straight after the crash. Obvious signs that he was in pain, but he certainly looked very cheesed off. I'm sure he knew from dull pain in his ankle that something wasn't quite right. He went over to hospital soon after we saw him on our screens. And yeah, it seems as though there was confirmation that he has an ankle injury. Nothing confirmed just yet, so hold off on any diagnosis, but enough for you to be prematurely, unfortunately, here in Valencia.
Real shame for Ayumu, real shame for Adrian Huertas too, where we remind you, just to reiterate, he's fractured both of his radii, his left and right radius are both fractured in a crash that we only saw sort of grainy trackside CCTV footage of, but it was a pretty nasty high side for the 99. That's not bad enough news for Huertas. One of those fractures is displaced. It will require surgery in the coming days too. So Huertas' rookie season does end early, leaving Moreira as the sole Italtrans rider for the rest of the weekend.
A nightmare scenario, isn't it? At the last race of the season, you're just hoping to go into the off-season with a clean bill of health and be able to focus on some rest and relaxation, which is absolutely deserved after a fairly punishing 22-round season. And then obviously to gradually crank the training up once again. Gian Antonio was quite interested talking about this yesterday. He said essentially, as a Grand Prix athlete, how you much January as the sole month to really get your fitness down and into shape, and then basically you start traveling quite intensively, and then it's just about trying to keep up to a certain level. You can only do so much training between races and flying as usual, hanging around in airports. So let's hope that Andres Huertas is not too much pain at the moment, and everything goes well with that surgery that he'll have on that displaced fracture. So, as Lewis said, a bit of a bum note to end the season on for the rookie, the outgoing World Sport champion.
Very pleasant temperatures now for this practice session this afternoon. It does feel noticeably hotter than it was this morning, largely because the heavy cloud cover that we were covered by earlier on today has now moved away. There are still one or two fluffy white clouds overhead, but otherwise it's blue sky and sunny conditions for this afternoon's practice session. So one thing that the title chasers don't have to worry about is any rain interfering with the action. You're wondering what kind of pace to expect in this session. The fastest lap we saw this morning, which is the fastest lap ever around a Moto2 lap of Ricardo Tormo. 33.050 from Alex Escrich on board the forward. I'll expect, if the conditions allow, laps in the 32s by the time we're done here this afternoon. Here's your wild card for the weekend, the 22 of Hector Garzo, who represents NTS in the Moto2 World Championship again for the first time in a couple of years.
That's a bit of a name for the past. The Japanese chassis manufacturer was a regular fixture in this championship for a couple of years with the RW Racing team. You can step away, and we've been led to believe in the last few years that they're quite keen to come back into the Moto2 World Championship, but I'm sure that'll happen in 2026. I don't think it will. I haven't really heard anything to that effect in the rumour mill. But good to see Garzo back here, good to see NTS back here as well. Always good to have a variety of chassis on the Moto2 grid. And as Lewis mentioned, we might use the first half of this session at least to go through some of our much coveted, highly coveted end of season awards, looking back across the previous 21 races around.
The third annual, fourth annual, something like that. Moto2 unofficial end of season awards. Before we, I guess, look into the individual categories that we've settled upon to decide the great, the good, and the not so good for Moto2 this season. I guess a nice point on which to start is how much we've enjoyed Moto2 this season. Of course, Pirelli really did change the game in Moto2 coming into last season. We saw immense unpredictability. Not only have we seen the unpredictability continue this season, but the quality of the racing at the front of the field, I think, has been as good as we've ever seen in this Moto2 class.
Yeah, absolutely. Moto2 had a bit of a golden age whenever it first came into existence as a championship, replaced the 250cc category. 2010, really safe from 2010 up until maybe 13, when Marc Marquez was a regular fixture in this class. It was producing some of the best racing anywhere in the world. And then I would say maybe in the later years of Dunlop being in the class, some of the racing wasn't quite top notch, to put it mildly. Did have many situations where riders would just settle into position from the first lap, and it became quite follow the leader stuff. But with Pirelli, has been a market change, a lot more need to manage the tyres over a full race distance, and that means that sometimes it's not always possible for riders to go flat chat from the first lap until the very end. A bit more management and strategy has to come into it, and always makes it a little more interesting, I feel. For the viewers, you mentioned variety, Lewis, 10 different winners this year, absolutely sensational. That's a record for the intermediate class, 17 different podium finishers, not quite a record, but still very impressive indeed. More than half the grid on the podium this year. And yeah, as you said, quality of the racing. We're going to come on to the best race as one of our categories for this year, but plenty to choose from. I remember we did this award back in 2022, and I was really scratching my head thinking, what was the best race that we saw this year, because there wasn't a great deal to choose from.
Should we work our way from bottom to top then? We'll end with the Rider of the Year, of course. Start with the Bull Ribbon Award, if anyone cares about these sort of things, but we do here in the Coaching Box. So let's start with the Performance of the Year, I guess the best one-off ride of the season. As we take a look at Sergio Garcia, who goes into the top 10, session currently led by David Alonso on 133.112. Which single performance or performances in 2025 stand out to you? Of which there have been several.
Yeah, there have been several. I mean, I could make a case for Senna Aegis in Silverstone, taking his first victory. Not only did he do beforehand, but he did so in dramatic circumstances right at the end of the race. He also did it when his bike was really under gear. He openly admitted afterwards that they got the gearing completely wrong, which meant that he was well done at top speed. Anytime we were on one of Silverstone's numerous long straights, and despite that, he still managed to come through, fight through from what was quite a visible handicap. He was getting past on the straight pretty much every lap. Still managed to position himself towards the end, but we're going to have to look at this rider here. Some of the performances that he's mustered, and pick one of them. I mean, there's been quite a few, if we're being honest. Sabtu was remarkable from, what, 25th on the grid to fight through to potential podium list. In fact, maybe even the potential victory had he not made that mistake trying to pass Dixon just a little bit too soon at the opening curve. But to do that at the Saxon Ring, one of the more difficult places, one of the tighter tracks as well, making it opening very, very difficult was remarkable. I think I said at the time it was Marc Marquez's how he fought through the pit. But I think I'm going to have to plumb for what he did last weekend in Portimao. Not only did he time his kind of more perfection over that weekend when he went pole position on Saturday, but how he managed to nerves as well on the Sunday, and basically go in to win when it really wasn't necessary. He could have come here with a 19 points advantage and it still would have been a fantastic position to be in. But he wanted to go right while the arm was hot and try and pass Colin Bayer late on. And I just thought it was a really complete performance when the pressure was properly on. I thought it was a true champion's ride. What about you?
We're talking about the unpredictability of Moto2. Just look at the standings at the moment. Championship contenders at the moment are on course for qualifying one, but this is still very, very early. Tony Arbolino's 33.069 is just under 200ths of a second away from the all-time lap record of Alex Escridge earlier on today. I've also got a Diogo Moreira performance, one of two that I'm struggling to choose between. Diogo Moreira in Indonesia is the one that really stood out to me. It was a weekend which really saw the titles decisively swing towards Moreira, of course, with Gonzalez's disqualification. What impressed me so much about that particular Grand Prix is that his title rival, Manu Gonzalez, was a second behind him for the entire Grand Prix. Despite that, Diogo Moreira made no mistakes at the front of the field. He also pulled, as he has done in quite a few Grand Prix lately, a spectacular last gas pole position out of the bag to deny Baccavara on that particular occasion. And once he took pole position and got the whole shot, he made Manu Gonzalez do the chasing. Gonzalez in the end could not chase him down, as Celestino Vietti is chasing a little bit of grip on the outside of the exit of turn 12. The other performance that, as I was looking back through the season trying to work out who impressed me, because I thought it was Moreira, should I say, in Saxon as well, but I actually can't separate how that race ended ultimately for Moreira. Had he completed that comeback, I think we would have had a very short discussion on the performance of the season. But Danny Holgado's victory in Motegi for me was extraordinary. He hadn't shown too many signs through the weekend that he had the pace. Nice to win the Grand Prix. His teammate goes down in the first sector on his current lap. David Alonso is currently in third place, one spot behind Danny Holgado. Turn 2, Alonso has gone down, which is an explosive speed crash around this particular circuit. 70 kilometers an hour in second gear through turn 2, and he's already trying to recover back onto the racetrack. Take a look at his crash now. He's the first bike up the road, just ahead of one of the MSI Boscachuros, and a front end tuck for David Alonso. But yeah, Holgado at one point was, I think, 5 seconds up the road, wasn't he? At the front of the field in that Japanese Grand Prix, and all sorts was going behind him. Ultimately, Jake Dixon just caught him, but a little bit too much traffic to chase him down in the latter stages of the Grand Prix. But spectacular victory from Daniel Holgado, who has taken 2 Moto2 victories this season, and they've both been lights to flag cruises, haven't they?
Yes, they have indeed. Really impressive stuff. Couldn't agree more with you, Lewis. Those were very good nominations. I'd also just give a quick shout out to what Danny Bruton was able to do in Barcelona for a rider standing in as a substitute rider for Teacher Dennis Montu, and has been doing so for the majority of the second part of this season. Be up there in second position for most of that race. Okay, it wasn't third late on, but that was a real breakout performance for Danny Bruton that showed that he's very much deserving a seat in this championship next year.
The breakout star of the year in Moto2 this season. There have been a few, in fairness. It's been one of the beauties of seeing such an unpredictable Moto2 season with the 17 different podium finishes, a few of those standing on a Moto2 podium for the very first time in their career. Of course, the rookies of David Alonso and Daniel Holgado. We've also seen first-time winners this year in Moto2 in the form of Yoko Moreira of Denis Untitled, Daniel Holgado, Sam Agius, David Alonso as well. So many riders have, I guess, broken out of the pack this season, which is a very difficult thing to achieve in Moto2. I really struggle to look past Barry Baltus for this one, who could yet end this season third in the World Championship. He's 25 points behind Manny Gonzalez, so given that he's not won yet, he can't take second in the World Championship, even if he wins on Sunday and Gonzalez fails to score. And I guess where Barry Baltus's breakout performance this season catches our attention is that he elevated himself this season from a level that only many, and well, I think we're being disrespectful against Barry Baltus, but many thought he had within him. Barry Baltus, of course, spent his MotoGP career to this point, or up until this season with the RWC. Of course, took a second place in Qatar, the first Grand Prix of the Pirelli era last season, but never really backed that up through the rest of 2025. But he's found a level of speed, a level of consistency, an ability to manage tyres through the latter part of a Grand Prix, which has almost set him apart on occasions. And I feel if Baltus has had a little bit of luck on certain occasions, perhaps not qualified so deep in the pack and found himself so deep in the field after 2 or 3 laps of a Grand Prix, I think we would have been talking about Barry Baltus as a Grand Prix winner. I think that's probably the one thing that's missing from this Moto2 season in 2025 is the Barry Baltus victory.
Yeah, I'm going to nominate the same rider. Barry Baltus has been the revelation of Moto2 in 2025, absolutely no question. I remember when he was second fastest at the pre-season test at Jerez, and we thought, okay, surely he got a toll from his teammate Aaron Canet to be able to set that time. And then you looked at some of the lap-by-lap analysis and you thought, oh no, he's actually consistently fast. We thought, okay, maybe it's just a test when there's no pressure. But fairly quickly in the season we started to understand, no, this is actually for real. We went back to Jerez. This one of the season he was second. Then the next race he was in, second place in Le Mans, I believe. And yeah, I mean, the rider that finished 21st in the championship last year, okay, he had that podium in the very first race, but then after that, he went on and barely scored any other points. I don't think he was inside the top 7 in any other race after that opening night podium in Qatar. And we know that Barry obviously had some serious personal issues to deal with last year. The death of his mother was obviously a very, very disruptive event. Seemed as though he just needed a bit of a change of scenery after a couple of years in the RW Racing squad. But yeah, this 5th season, he has been a model of consistency. 12 top 6 finishes. And previously, he had only scored 2 in 5 seasons. So he has been very fast. And also, as you said, Lewis, tire management seems to be, I think, by his own admission, quite poor at tire management. I remember back in the Duckall days, they would say he was one of the worst for tire conservation. And there's been several races this year where Baltus has unquestionably been the fastest rider at the end of a race, like the race in Misano where he very nearly caught up with Celestino Vietti. Take up Phillip Island as well. He was very strong towards the end of the race around the track where we know tire conservation is very critical. So yeah, Baltus, take a mind, what a performance this year.
I guess if there's one Grand Prix you might look back on in 2025 and think that was the one that got away, perhaps the Saxon Ring. But of course we had the red flag late in that Grand Prix when he was just lining up a move, wasn't he? He was just plotting how he was going to pass Denis Untitled in the closing stages, and of course we had that crash involving Álvaro Arenas and Marcos Ramirez into turn 1, which punctured the air test before and early into that Grand Prix. That may be the one that got away for Barry this year.
Yeah, and just a very quick shout out, you mentioned it previously, Daniel Holgado. I mean, I always rated Holgado, but not to this level. I didn't think he was going to come into Moto2 and win 2 races in his first year. And what's more impressive, 6th in the championship, ahead of David Alonso. David Alonso destroyed him last year. Okay, Holgado was 2nd in the championship. Holgado outscored him by 165 points in last year's Moto3 series. And for Holgado to convincingly beat Alonso in this year's Moto2 championship and kind of be there right from the very first race. I mean, he was inside the top 10 in each of his first 4 Moto2 races. Absolutely sensational. And in the second half of the season, since the summer break, only Yoko Moreira has scored more points than him.
And in the last 5 Grand Prix, 2 Aspar riders are 2nd and 4th in the sort of mini championship from the last 5 Grand Prix. Alonso 69 points, Holgado 60. they have really put their hands up as potential title challenges for next season. Yeah, Holgado's my surprise of the year. That's the next category that we have on our list, for very much the same reason. Not really expected him to struggle in Moto2, but just expecting to adapt so quickly in this Moto2 class. And it's very clear through the last sort of 12 to 18 months. You just need to speak to him in the paddock. He has matured an awful lot in the last sort of year to 2 seasons. His English has come on leaps and bounds as well. He is perhaps much more intelligent and considered than perhaps we gave him credit for in his Moto3 campaign. There's no question that Holgado is going to be a regular winner and surely title contender next season. The other one is on a more general point, is kind of going back to how we started the discussion. My other surprise of the season is how unpredictable Moto2 has continued to be this season. I guess you can understand why it was so unpredictable, why we saw so many different podium finishes last season, because of course it was the first season of the Pirelli era. I think Moto was expecting here too things to settle down a little bit and for some normality to descend on Moto2. And yes, we have had a clear hierarchy, a clear title battle amongst the 5 riders, which of course are now reduced to 2. But I think because the margins are so tight in Moto2, because the field is so competitive, I guess what Moto2 is providing us with is a platform that if one rider, one bike, one chassis, one tyre combination just gels with a certain Grand Prix weekend, then incredible results are possible, and long may this Moto2 unpredictability continue.
Yeah, couldn't have said it better myself, but it's absolutely my surprise of the year, Aaron Canet. He was my pre-season favourite. I think he was many people's pre-season favourite after his performance in the second half of last year. 4 victories in that second half of the year when he did a decent job of chasing down Iger. It was never really that much doubt last year's championship fight, but certainly Canet was the faster rider in the second part of 2024. And considering he was staying in a settled team, settled environment, pretty much the same personnel around him in the Fantasy Racing team, for Canet to have got to this year with just 1 win all season long, and really at no point to have shown the speed, superior speed to his peers, like we saw in the second half of last year. I did not foresee that coming. And, I'd have to say it has been a big surprise for him to be 55 points back on the championship summit at this stage. I really thought this was going to be Canet's year.
1 win, and perhaps even more surprisingly, only 1 pole position this season for Aaron Canet. Because one thing that you could usually trust Aaron Canet for was his explosive speed. Hasn't really had that in Moto2 this season, because we thought in the first half of the season he was the one doing the consistent, stealthy job of challenging for the World Championship. Kept himself very much in contention until around about the halfway stage of the season, and once it started to go wrong for Canet, it's gone very wrong. No scores in Brno when he was knocked off at the first corner, or crashed at the first corner when he was pushed wide. Didn't score in Barcelona either. Only scored a solitary point in Japan and in Malaysia. So there are 4 Grand Prix in the second half of the season that Canet has essentially written off. And ultimately, with some spirited comeback performances, particularly in Indonesia when he came through to the podium from 21st on the grid, just about kept him in contention. But ultimately, too late for Aaron Canet when Manny Gonzalez and Joe Moreira have taken 4 wins apiece and 9 podiums apiece. With the solitary win and 6 podiums is going to do it for Aaron Canet. He's my disappointment of the year, or certainly from a riding point of view, my disappointment of the year. Just a rider who's fallen short of expectations, but I think we're going to be in agreement generally on our disappointment of the year, and it's not a rider but a constructor.
It is indeed, yeah. It's an instructor that took the first part of last year's Moto2 Championship by absolute storm, lost the squirrel. They really have failed to live up to expectations in this year's Moto2 Championship,
which isn't easy to notice when they've doubled their output of constructors and chassis for the season. Got 8 riders on Moto2 bottom scorers this season.
Yeah, exactly. You just have to look at the riders that are on the chassis this year and think, well, I mean, we'd say 2, maybe even 3 of those riders, in fact, for sure, 3 of those riders should be up there fighting for Moto2 Championship. Jake Dixon, Celesai, Tony Arbolino have shown in previous years that they can at least get into the cusp of the fight, but it's been quite remarkable just how far short they have fallen. I mean, Arbolino has had a nightmare year. Alonso Lopez, another name you can put in that list. Terrible year. How many top 10s has Lopez had so far this year? I think maybe 6 or 7. A lot of those results were actually 10th places, so he's, aside from a podium in Kota, being found wanting by quite a great deal. And there's no question that Pirelli got a little bit riskier with their tyre allocation this year after being very conservative in their first year in the class, understandably so. They realised everything was okay last year, they could probably go a good deal softer with the tyres that they brought to certain tracks. There's no doubt that shift to softer rear tyre rubber was a real hindrance to the Moto2 chassis. They had problems turning, chattering, almost too much grip, and as a result of that they found that they really couldn't turn quite as quickly and skillfully as they had in previous years.
8 top 10s, but only 1 top 6 for Alonso Lopez, as Danny Munoz almost high-sided himself on the way out of 11. He was on course to potentially set a new all-time lap record. It is so close. I know we say it all the time in Moto2, but look at this. Less than half a second covers the top 20 in this session. 3/10 covers the top 14, which means that at the moment, World Championship leader Diogo Moreira is not going through the qualifying 2 out of right. Here's the Munoz moment when the rear steps out of it. He was caught Sergio Garcia's attention up to the road. He'll have heard what was going on behind him, and Munoz left a big black line and left all the lap time on the table. Gonzalez is up in 5th at the moment on a 1:33.244. We've got Arbolino and Holgado on 33.0s, Alonso and Dixon on 33.1. We then have Gonzalez, Agius, Lopez, Villa, Vietti, Salach and Ortola all on 33.2s. Escreech, Arenas, Garcia, Ramirez and Aggi all on 33.3s, with Moreira currently on a 33.5. 4.5 tenths of a second off the pace. Sounds like nothing, but he's currently in 19th position, 1 place ahead of Aaron Canet, who's also on course for qualifying 1. We've seen some spectacular battles in Moto2 this season. We've seen so many victories being decided on the last lap. We've seen some spectacular overtakes to secure those victories. Which is your favourite?
My favourite, undoubtedly, was the finale of the Aragon GP, when Dennis Onju spectacularly managed to reel in Diogo Moreira, went into the final turn ahead, and then proceeded to pass him on the outside. Big victory by what, 3/1000 of a second, I believe, coming across the line, the closest finish in Moto2 history, not quite the intermediate class, going all the way back to 1949, but since this class came into existence in 2010, and I mean, to do it at that turn at Aragon, one of the scariest turns you have at that particular circuit, to do it around the outside as well was quite spectacular, and on the rider who probably is going to go on and become champion. Hats off to Dennis Onju, the final little joy of that particular memory. And after the race I asked him, you've been so strong in that last left-hander all weekend long, what's your secret? And he said, 2 big balls.
Who's going to argue with that? Unfortunately at the moment though, Dennis Onju wants to swing his legs isn't the problem, it's elsewhere, but he's currently struggling, still working his way back to fitness after another big injury which essentially ended his season back in the summer. We wish Dennis Onju all the best. We hope to see him back fully fit once again for the start of 2026, when he'll be partnering Aaron Canet in what will be a fascinating pairing in the Moto2 back Alpine with the ST the next season. My overtake of the year, well, it's another last lap overtake for a victory. David Alonso on Manu Gonzalez to win the Hungarian Grand Prix. I could have picked any one of Alonso's overtakes in that Grand Prix. Remember, he was outside the top 10 at the end of the first lap, or partway through the first lap at a circuit which we've been saying all weekend. Can't overtake around Ballerton Park. David Alonso made complete mockery of that on his way to the field. He produced all sorts of impressive lunges into turn 1, including on Jake Dixon, including on Aaron Canet. He also passed Diogo Moreira into there as well. But what I loved about that is we were riding on board with Gonzalez, weren't we, on the final lap, looking backwards at Alonso. Didn't look like he was anywhere near close enough to launch an attack from there. But Alonso did force Manu Gonzalez onto the paint, eventually cost Manu Gonzalez second place. And it was the vintage David Alonso last lap tactical approach which so often secured him victories in Moto3, which earned him his first Moto2 victory. As we follow Danny Munoz across the line, that is a new all-time lap record, and we are now into 1:32.868. Yeah, David Alonso, after we were giving out an award for comeback of the season, Hungary might well be in it, and once again, with the 2 title front-runners up ahead of him, in the end it was David Alonso who stole the limelight in Hungary.
Yeah, it was indeed, which leads us nicely into our next category, race of the year in the Moto2 class. Does Hungary get your vote, Lewis?
About 21 contenders, I think, for this one. It's been so good in Moto. I narrowed this down to 3 in Moto2. Hungary was one of them. Australia was another, although the battles in that race were all behind the runaway leader, Selesai. So, well, always, when I think of what makes a race of the year, year, you want constant overtaking. I think you want a lead change on the final lap. I think that also helps. Ideally, you would want the high stakes of a World Championship up for grabs as well, but it was way too early in the season for this one. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say, not only is Silverstone my race of the year, I still stand by. I think it's the best Moto2 race we've ever seen.
Yeah, hard to argue with that. It also gets my vote as well, and I would also make a case for Hungary and for Australia. You would say Aragon, then it's on to one right at the end of the race. That was another vintage race, but yes, Silverstone just had it all. There's no doubt it's very windy and quite tricky conditions out there, which I think slowed the general pace down overall a little bit. But it had this delicious lead group of 5 riders. Aaron Canet doing most of the running, but he was never able to get clear of the likes of David Alonso, Diogo Moreira. Senna Ages was up there as well, and yeah, it was just box office stuff. And you said you obviously want a brilliant finale, if you could call it a classic race. That had the finale of all finales, I think, in any Grand Prix category this year, with Canet basically losing the lead going into oh no, it was the corner before Vale.
Stowe, wasn't it?
Stowe, sorry, at the end of the back straight.
And then he tries to lunge back through on the way to Vale and cause all some manner of chaos behind him.
Exactly, yeah. Senna Ages was just so well placed to benefit from that, to come home and take his first victory. We also had a cool situation, which we had Australian, Brazilian and Colombian on the podium, and I think it was one of the first non-European podiums, not official Europeans on the podium for the first time in an age as well. So yeah, so much to love about that Silverstone race.
Which leads us to the Rider of the Year. I mean, for me, again, in this one, I narrowed it down to 3 potential contenders. Barry Baltus and Daniel Holgado, who we've already mentioned, to be breakout stars this season. I do also want to give an honourable mention to Manny Gonzalez, who started the season. He was certainly the rider of the first half of this season. Ultimately, just hasn't been able to limit the damage in the second half of the season, subject to something dramatic happening to Diogo Moreira on Sunday. But given the level of consistency that Diogo Moreira has been operating at, for, as we discussed this morning, actually further back than we realised, all the way back to the start of the European season, Moreira, when things haven't gone wrong, has been a permanent top 4, top 5 contender. Moreira just about edges it for me as the rider of 2025. What say you?
Yeah, again, I can't argue with you, Lewis. I think you have to be a very brave man to argue against Diogo Moreira being the rider of the year, 2025. That consistency has been at play. He's been an ever-present toward the front in the second part of the season. I mean, he's comfortably outscored anyone in the last 9 races since he came back from the summer break. Posted some of the most important and impressive performances of the year that we previously mentioned. And the fact that he's able to outscore his main championship competitor in 8 of the last 9 and basically do an 84-point swing in the championship in his favour. I mean, you mentioned earlier today, Lewis, no rider has ever come from that far back in an intermediate class championship ever. And for Moreira to be on the cusp of doing that in just his second season in this category. Okay, he's had 2 more in Moto3, but still just in his sophomore year, I think is mightily impressive. So yeah, he gets my vote too.
And to just sneak you one extra bonus stat, because I want to give a shout out to one of our hard-working colleagues back in Barcelona, Luke Ox from our social media team. For the stat of the year, he's come up with this one earlier on today for me, not including the first ever Grand Prix season in 1949. This year in Moto2, the first ever season where we've seen 3 brand new nationalities win a Grand Prix in that class. Of course, we've seen the first Colombian, Turkish and Brazilian intermediate class victories this season. So I just wanted to give Luke a shout out for that, for all this hard work through this season and continuing to this weekend. And I guess as these final time attacks come in, and we'll turn our attention to what is going to be a crucial 8 minutes in this session, I guess a quick word of next season. As we touched upon earlier on, so many of the big hitters in Moto2 are sticking around for next season. Only Diogo Moreira and Jake Dixon of those in the top 8 currently in the World Championship are departing us at the end of this season. Of course, Moreira to MotoGP, Dixon to World Superbike, Albert Arenas is also moving on to Fashion Stewart. He's heading to World Supersport next season. I think there's much evidence to suggest that we're going to have any kind of drop in Moto2. It should be as exciting as it has been in the first 2 years of the Pirelli era next year.
Yeah, absolutely. As Danny Holgado brings it down to a 32.5, a new lap record again we see in this session, and he has absolutely smashed the previous best. Alex Scritch coming into this section, which is half a second slower, and we might not be done there. Philip Salas on the impressive run, although Holgado was notably quicker than the Czech rider. Jumps up into second position. Still nothing from Herrera in this session so far. Down in 20th position. You can see that he's not really so far off, just 1 second off the top. 7/10 of second place. But yeah, next year is going to be blockbuster again in Moto2, Lewis. And if you're asking me who my early favourite is, going to have to point you towards the rider that dominated the Moto3 Championship last year in his second season.
I think the two Aspar riders for me at the moment start next year as the two title favourites. I think Alonso perhaps just edges it from Holgado because we know he is such a formidable frontrunner in Grand Prix classes and proven in Moto3. So Manny Gonzalez, if he does miss out this weekend, which is the likeliest scenario, it has to be said, surely he will come again next season and will definitely benefit from the experience of fighting for a Moto2 title this season, as long as the experience of losing the lead doesn't scar him too much. What Aaron Canet can do on Boscoscuro machinery is going to be of intrigue. Can Barry Baltus back up his breakthrough season and become a Moto2 winner next year if he doesn't, of course, achieve it this weekend? Got some very exciting rookies moving up as Holgado now improves to a 32.4. Now a quarter of a second clear of 80th. Of course, we've got from Moto3, Jose Antonio Rueda, Anton Becerra, Luca Lanetta, Tayo Furusato, all moving up into Moto2 as well, which is certainly plenty of cause for excitement. So roll on 2026 in Moto2, but we do still have a 2025 champion to crown as yellow flags in front of the first sector of this lap. Some of the effects Diogo Moreira's current lap as he enters the final corner. Manny Gonzalez, like Moreira, has now been bumped out of the top 14. So at the moment, we've got the riders first, second and fourth in the World Championship all over the top four. It's Holgado, moments after taking the top spot, who's crashed. So both Aspar riders have gone down this afternoon. I think he's down at turn 2, the same corner that Alonso crashed. So for the second Friday in a row, the Aspar riders have gone down into the same gravel track.
Yeah, and he was absolutely flying. 2 lap records in succession for Danny Holgado. He was most certainly pushing on. Let's see what Manny Gonzalez can do on this particular lap as he comes out of turn 14, the final turn, down towards the start-finish straight. And Barra jumps up in second position with the 5 lap, and Gonzalez with the minimum bus jumps into 8th. So suddenly we have 1 and 2 in the championship, now it's 12th and 8th.
Shout out to Guevara for that, given how his morning went. Basically wrote off this morning's Street Practice 1 session with 2 crashes. He comes second on a 32.6. Here is Holgado's crash. This is deja vu from an Aspar point of view, although a very different kind of crash that one, as he got all sorts of shapes on the way into the corner and then just dropped to the side in the gravel track. So both in the same corner, but very, very different crashes for Holgado. And for Alonso, Holgado's placed in the top 14, though not under any great threat at the moment.
Yeah, certainly not. Although the same cannot be said about Diogo Moreira. Just looking at the times on the left of your screen there, you can see that Moreira, if a couple of riders behind are able to improve by 1/10 of a second, then he will be outside the top 14. So I do feel that the Brazilian needs to improve. Yet again, I don't think he's going to do so on this current lap. He's around half a second off through split number 3.
One rider we should be watching is Jake Dixon. He's coming out of the final corner now. Here he is, currently in 18th place. This should bump Moreira down a place. Ramirez has just got up into 6th. Best we've seen from him for quite some time. Munoz takes second. And now Dixon moves ahead of Munoz into second place. Moreira has now been bumped out of the top 14 with Ortola up into 9th. So we've now got Boscoscuro, 2nd, 4th, 6th, 9th, 11th, 13th, all inside the Q2 place at the moment. Gonzalez isn't exactly safe himself. He's now been relegated to 12th spot. He now comes across the lineup behind Eric Fernandez, and he climbs 4 places into 8th.
Yeah, a bit of a deep breath inside the intact GP box as Gonzalez manages to do that. And Moreira, you can see, is already pulled out of this lap, so he will not be improving as it stands. This could just be a little bit of jeopardy here for the Moto2 World Championship going into tomorrow, because Moreira looked so cool and calm no matter what happened to him in Portimao, but crucially he was able to get inside the top 14 at the end of Friday afternoon. It is a lot less clear cut here. 1 week later in Valencia, Aaron Canet is down in 21st. What can he do? He jumps up into 14th place, so another place demoted for Moreira.
So this morning, Alex Scritch, who we're keeping an eye on, he set a 33.0, a new all-time lap record. That lap time now would not even get you through to Q2. A Scritch up into 5th place, underlining what a fine job the Ford rider is doing right now.
Yeah, impressive day for Alex Scritch. Really, really impressive stuff. Just after Forward announced the WP suspension in 2026, which is a suspension which really helped the likes of Manny Gonzalez, David Alonso and Danny Holgado in the Aspar team as well. Tony Arbolino looks as though he's going to jump up inside the top 10 as well. He goes 9th with that latest time. Gil Pereira finds himself down in 19th position.
He needs to find a couple of tenths to get himself in. Here he is. He's got 2 laps really remaining with this because he's gone across the line with 2 minutes 50 to go, so he'll miss the 3rd lap by around about 9 or 10 seconds when he comes around in a couple of laps time. So these are crucial moments here for the World Championship leader. I guess if he wants some consolation if he misses out, it's not like Manny Gonzalez is threatening a domination of this weekend. He's only just up in 10th at the moment, so Gonzalez has only saved himself by 7/100ths of a second. But Diogo Moreira at the moment staring at a surprise qualifying 1. Last time we saw Diogo Moreira in qualifying 1 was back at Brno, of course, when he only turned up to serve the penalty.
Yeah, and he was quite considerably injured and battered and bruised on that particular occasion. There was a clear reason why he was so slow, and you can see his time has gone away massively in that second split. So Diogo Moreira, he's not going to have time to come in and fit new tyres at the end of this session, Lewis, but he could be looking at a spot in Q1 tomorrow.
Another rider who's really paying the price for his crash earlier on is Alonso. He's down in 21st now. His 33.112 that he set very early on in the piece. He hasn't improved upon that, set his best lap time on his 3rd lap of the session, 2nd time lap, and no signs of improvement at the moment from the 80 either. So at the moment, some serious shocks. Aaron Canet heading for Q1, David Alonso heading for Q1, and so too Diogo Moreira. He now exits or rounds the final corner, turn 14, and just how much jeopardy hangs over this title battle is going to be decided in the next 92 seconds or so.
Yeah, absolutely. And in Q1 tomorrow, because if the likes of Canet, Salas, Lopez, Arenas are also in Q1 and Alonso, then there's by no means a given that Diogo Moreira on the form of today is going to progress through that, which must be really pleasing to hear for the intact GP squad. You can see Manny Gonzalez is not going to improve on this time, but it doesn't really matter. I think the best of the Pirelli rear tyres is done. We're just not seeing too many improvements on our timing screen, and that could well be it.
Well, so much of 2025 has been about Diogo Moreira looking a little bit under par, but then just pulling it out of the bag when he needs it on a Friday afternoon or on a Saturday afternoon in qualifying. If Moreira does it again here, then this really will crush the spirit and the optimism of intact GP. Jorge Navarro making sure he stays well out of the way, but Moreira has lost so much time. He's already 6 tenths of a second down. He needs to pull back another 1/4 of a second in the second half of the lap to get through. So we'll at least take Moreira to the 3rd sector here before we completely call this. As he now rounds turns 9, 10 and 11. Danny Holgado not watching, as we are, to see how the championship leader gets on. Holgado is still quickest, despite his crash at turn 2. He's now 7 tenths down. And the story of day 1 here on this title-deciding weekend in Moto2, the World Championship leader, Diogo Moreira, is in qualifying 1.
Yeah, I don't care how cool you are, how well you're able to deal with pressure, he will be feeling some serious pressure tonight. Q1 tomorrow, you will not want to miss it as Diogo Moreira tries to get through that inside the top 4 positions, along with the likes of Canet, Salas, Lopez, Arenas and Lopez. This is far from an ideal situation for the championship leader.
19th place at the end of day 1. He has mentioned, first time he's been in qualifying 1 since the Czech Grand Prix back in July, when of course he was far from 100% fit. Of course, the time before that was Saxon's break, of course, when he famously came from 25th on the grid to nearly finish on the podium. So Moreira has got set at the start of session. There was one banana skin that he might slip over this weekend. Friday practice was it, and Moreira has slipped.
Yes, indeed, you approved. Right indeed, Lewis. The only saving grace for him is Friday, rarely when he shows his best. He does normally find himself and his way into the weekend. He's able to do that in Portimao, for example, but there's going to be a lot more jeopardy on the line this time around. And just a little glimpse of hope for Manny Gonzalez, who, as you previously said, hasn't quite shown the speed today, which suggests that he's going to be able to break clear from everyone on Sunday. Exceptionally close at the front of Moto2 so far, but this could just be that little extra bit of motivation and hope as well. And it could still be possible if Saturday does not go Diogo's way.
Confirmation of Moreira's first Q1 appearance since the summer break, since the Czech Grand Prix. We have the riders 1st, 4th, 7th and 9th in the World Championship. That's Moreira, Canet, Alonso and Arenas, all in qualifying 1. tomorrow. Do not miss that Q1 session tomorrow afternoon. Up at the top, Danny Holgado, despite his crash, was a 10th clear of the field on a 32.4 from Dixon, Munoz and Ethan Guevara. Three fifth. Trio Spaniards there, well, four of them, I guess, if you count Holgado, who have all really done spectacular jobs this afternoon.
Yeah, a couple of standout performances there. Holgado, unbelievably good. Danny Munoz up in third. Ethan Guevara, after his travails earlier today, 2 crashes, the second of which being a real egg beater. And Alex British fastest this morning, backing that up with the 5th fastest time this afternoon. Brilliant performance by the number 11. And possibly the best day that we've seen from him in his Moto2 career so far.
Well, Diogo Moreira might well be, I guess, taking some comfort from the fact that Manny Gonzalez was only 10th himself today. We'll remind you, it is worth reiterating for the World Championship, Diogo Moreira only needs to finish 14th if Manu Gonzalez wins the Valencia Grand Prix on Sunday afternoon over 22 laps, 12:15 local time, Sunday lunchtime for the Moto2 title decider. If Manu Gonzalez does not win the Valencia Grand Prix on Sunday, then it does not matter what Diogo Moreira does. He is champion anyway. So, not all lost by any means for Diogo Moreira today, but has perhaps a little layer of nerves that the Brazilian could have done without.
Yeah, let's face it, a little bit of entertainment for us, because we thought it was a done deal when we were talking about it earlier today. It really does take a lot to get Diogo out of his stride. Manu Gonzalez getting a warm round of applause from the Intact GP squad after a solid performance today. There was a couple of moments when it looked as though he could well be out of the top 14, but instead it's his battle rival Diogo Moreira.
Title twist then on the final Friday of the season in Valencia. Holgado, despite his late crash, top practice from Jake Dixon and Danny Munoz. Ethan Guevara, despite going down twice this morning, took 4th ahead of Alex Scridge. Top 5 in both sections for the forward rider. Cenarati is 6th ahead of Celestino Vietti, Barry Balton. Tony Arbolino and Manu Gonzalez 10th. He's through the Q2, joined by Vaya Garcia, Ortola and Ramirez. The big story though is there, P19. Diogo Moreira misses automatic Q2 for the first time since Brno. Joining him in that Q1 session, 2 of the other top 7 riders in the World Championship, Aaron Canet and David Alonso, who also paid the price for crashing at turn 2. So Danny Holgado, with an eventful Friday afternoon, tops the session. The big story though is that the World Championship leader, Diogo Moreira, has made life difficult for himself. Diogo into Q1 tomorrow, with Gonzalez straight into Q2. This Moto2 title battle is not done yet. MotoGP Practice is coming up next.
MotoGP's 14th and final European stop over the season brings the world's best riders back to Valencia for the first time since 2023. Known for its art and science, Valencia is Spain's 3rd largest city where old meets new, making a popular city.